All right, we're recording.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for taking the time to have this chat. This is the Breakfast and Learn for writing technical books. This for you all, it's Breakfast and Learn, but for me, I'm 5 hours ahead. This is more tea time and learn for me. I guess the kind of like context for this discussion is that a few weeks ago, Alex had that kind of brainstorming session about the future of Indie Hall, and he asked about community goals and personal goals and professional goals. And one of the things that I mentioned was wanting to write a technical book. And my day-to-day job is a technical writer, and so I write kind of a lot of like kind of shorter, smaller bits of documentation for customers. And I've been thinking a long time about kind of having sort of a bigger project to my name that wasn't kind of my employer's. And so that's what I was thinking about when I mentioned, oh yeah, I'd like to learn more about doing this thing. And thankfully, as is Indie Hall's tendency, there are a lot of people who know about these kinds of things. And so after a little bit of arm twisting, was able to arrange this Breakfast and Learn. And so kind of how I was thinking is we sort of maybe just kind of go around and well, I mean, I've sort of already done it. Oh yeah, I don't know if I mentioned my name. I'm Daniel Beck. But yeah, I thought we could maybe kind of go around, say who we are and where we're coming from with this conversation, and then kind of go from there. I have a couple like sort of kind of starter questions that we could maybe talk about, but like if there's something you're interested in talking about or interested in sharing,
Yeah,
definitely go from there. But I guess like kind of one programming note is just that we have kind of another maybe 45 minutes here. I know some people have commitments immediately after, so
cool.
So if we need more time, there's always the Indie Skills channel, or we could schedule another one of these. But yeah, so take it away, somebody.
Yeah, and I know Sebastian's gonna have to peel away. His baby woke up.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, my baby woke up. I'm super interested in seeing this recording later, so thank you very much, both Alex and you.
Nice meeting you. Bye.
Take it easy. Okay, who wants to go first? Just quick intros.
Yeah. Yep. I'm Sam. Hello. We've talked online, but I don't know how much in person. I've not thought about publishing a how-to book at all, but I'm fascinated and read all the time, and I'm always looking just to learn more things in these types of conversations. So I'm not sure how much I'll have to add, but I'm gonna listen.
Yeah.
Probably take notes.
I'm Cattell, and we've chatted a little bit on Slack, and I run things over at A Book Apart, which is a small publishing house that publishes, our little tagline is brief books for people who make websites, which is quickly changing because now it's sort of like digital web everything, which is awesome. And yeah, so I've been doing this for like 3.5 years, and so I know a lot about it, probably not nearly as much as I could, but I work with a wide variety of people, writing everything from technical books on programming languages to content strategy to design theory and a bunch of stuff in between. And the one thing I'll say about our books is that they're like around 100 to 150 pages, so they're short. It's sort of a brief approach. It's not a big 300-page reference that you might find for like some specs. But yeah, so I'm really psyched to talk to anyone who's interested in that, doing publishing, reading, otherwise.
Cool. We're just getting started, so you're not late at all. Just background introductions, who you are and interests in the topic.
Sure. So my name is Ross Kuklinski. I'm in the tech world, so I do a lot of cloudy stuff. I've done video tutorials before, so I did an O'Reilly video tutorial series called Introduction to CoreOS, and I've been invited by a couple of publishing companies to write various books on Kubernetes, but I haven't yet agreed to sign the line. I'm still trying to figure out whether or not it's something I want to take on because I know it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
I didn't get as much out of the video tutorial series as I wanted, which was sort of a negative experience, but I'm still excited about the opportunity And I did get a lot of sort of individual personal brand out of that. So yeah, that's where I am now.
Cool. I'm Alex. In my alternate universe next to Indy Hall, I helped a lot of people self-publish technical books, business topics as well. Stuff that definitely falls in that sort of like how technical, not necessarily for tech, but the how-to category. So I'm interested in sort of the full chain from how you figure out who you're writing for, how to actually organize your work and finish the book, which is something a lot of people struggle with, and then also the marketing and launch part of things as well. I've been a part of writing and publishing a bunch of them. I actually don't have a title under my own name though. That's actually not entirely true. With the audio, I have a reverse audio book. You can talk a little bit about that as a process as well.
Yeah.
Just a minor technical thing. Can we turn the camera like a few degrees towards Alex's
Yep.
side of the table? You're sort of falling off the edge there, was all. Perfect.
Easy.
We don't want Alex falling off.
No.
So one area that I was particularly interested in, like coming from where I am, where I do a lot of writing, and so sort of the process of working on maybe something like the length of a chapter doesn't seem so intimidating. You know, you kind of hear stories people going, oh no, there's a whole book to think through, but the thing that I find sort of mystifying about having a book is sort of has to do with more the audience, where writing about a product, like a service that, you know, I have customers that I can talk to and I can find out what they need to know and what they want to know and get that sort of feedback in that way. To write a book seems like it's much more of a blank slate where you go, oh, you know, who's going to read this thing and why? And how do you take, you know, how do you take that sort of, that really kind of big unknown question there and start moving in a direction of something that somebody would want to actually read?
I mean, having so many books under your belt, I'm curious how a Book Apart approaches that question.
Yeah, and I mean we're super lucky. So far we have most of the time we have people approaching us who want to write something and, you know, and put it out. So we're really lucky in that respect. However, we do. You know, we do kind of decide on what we're going to publish against a fairly short list of criteria. And one of those things is looking at, I mean, a lot of times I just spend time looking at what's already out there and sort of like how saturated it is. So, you know, if, and I would say like our biggest competitors are O'Reilly and Rosenfeld. So we look at other publishers to see what they're doing and whether they have, you know, a dozen books on a subject. And if it's done, you know, in our eyes, if it's done really well, that means something. And I think like for us specifically, and I think probably for, you know, I'm imagining what you probably want to do is like you want to bring a certain take to the subject matter. That's really important for us. Like we don't want to just publish a book on here's how to write JavaScript. We want to work with someone who's going to write, you know, their personal take on it, but also because they've been writing about it or speaking about it or teaching it in a way that's like, doesn't necessarily need to be like new and flashy, but just something that brings something new to the table.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The related to that, I mean, a couple of things you said in there. I see a lot of folks who are worried that the thing that they're thinking about writing about has already been written about.
Yeah.
And that's not a reason not to write it.
Yeah.
It's actually like, especially if it's something that's selling well. So like on one of the sort of cheats, not really a cheat, it's just a good research technique, is to go on Amazon and look at books in your category and research the 3, 4, and 5-star reviews and look specifically for reviews that people liked the book, but there was still something missing. Mm-hmm. And think, is there a way that you could improve on it or build on it or complement it? Because even every successful book or really any product out there still leaves people wanting for more. And if you're able to take your personal angle to it, you can add to it. The goal is not to complete it, but to build on it. And it takes a lot of the edge off of trying to carve out a category or do something that's never been done before. And it also sort of forces you to think about who it is that you're writing for. I imagine the easiest starting point is people who do something like what you do versus trying to pull something out of the ether. So between those two techniques, I think it takes a lot of the anxiety away from the giant unknown and starts narrowing it down to, oh, I noticed a bunch of people are asking questions around this, and then start heading in that direction.
I think it's also like when we sign with someone, we want.
Oh, I might be.
As a writer, whether you're publishing with someone or self-publishing or whatever, is like, right? We want you to be really passionate and like not just love what you're writing about, but be really immersed in it, right? Like you want to write something that and really love, because then it's not as painful.
Can you talk a little bit more about that process? I guess it was a little bit surprising to me that that you have writers coming to you with an idea, and that you're kind of going from that. Like, what does that process look like? Where you go from a writer contacts you to actually committing to saying, okay, yeah, we're gonna publish a book with you.
Yeah. So most of the time, someone will reach out and say, I have a book idea, and I've literally talked to people in the widest range of like, I want to write a book, and then I say, all right, cool, and like that's it. And then sometimes we have a lot of great conversation around it, and it kind of it goes somewhere it doesn't. But I'd say like, and then like the other range is someone comes and they've already obviously thought about it. They've been speaking or writing articles about it. It sounds like you are already writing shorter form, which is, I think, a huge help. Having kind of thought through the process a little bit in that workflow is really helpful. So once we kind of have an idea that they've thought about something and have it, more or less solidified, we do like a little proposal questionnaire type of thing, and I'm super happy to share that with whoever would like to see it, because it's age long, and it just has some questions around thinking about your audience, everything from like, why do you want to write this book? Why do you think you should write this book? Who's your audience? And just thinking about those questions, I think sometimes gets people thinking about like, do I want to write this book? And then if we're still kind of not quite sure about the approach or sort of how the concepts are going to shake out, we also do a chapter outlining exercise. And again, sometimes we do that after we've signed. Most of the time it's before, because we really want to get an idea of. Also, we really want to get an idea of like how it's going to be to work with someone as an author. And I'm happy to share that as well, because it's a great exercise, I think, just in writing. So yeah, and then once we kind of decide and agree that we're going to work together, we have a whole editing process and publishing process. And we've actually just in the last year started working with writers at the beginning. So meaning we're doing check-ins and kind of, we set some milestones up while the person is writing, instead of just being like, go write your book. Yeah. And then coming back with like what they think is a first draft. And, because it's just, I think it's a lot. It's a big project. And, it's nice to be a little bit more tethered.
Does a Book Apart have like early access programs? Like I know O'Reilly with their if you're doing a longer book, especially at least in the tech space, like they'll say, hey, write the first 3 chapters and then we'll give that away for free, mm-hmm. and hope that people or you buy for the whole book, but you get like basically beta versions of the book.
Yeah.
Is that something that
we don't, and we haven't? We've talked about doing that occasionally. we sort of just don't feel like we have the resources to manage that.
Yeah.
We also are like, I think we're very, we have a very like tight editing process, and I think we're just not in a place where we're like, let's experiment with that and
Right.
you know, put some of that on display. Which isn't to say that we don't want to. I think we want to do it right, and we're
Yeah, and I guess I didn't need to put you on the
No,
spot
no,
there. I'm like,
yeah.
talk about your business.
It's a
but
great
like,
it's a great question.
Does the publishing industry in general think that is generally a good idea, or is it something that
I think it's more popular in self-publishing than
Yeah.
with publishers.
Absolutely.
And there's absolutely pros and cons.
Mhm.
Pros, especially if you're doing things like pre-sales. A, you've got money in your pocket first. B, you've got a little bit of like, okay, people actually want this, and that can be motivation to carry you across the finish line.
Definitely.
Flip side of that very much depends on you and your own psychology and how you finish things, because I've also seen people be paralyzed by the I owe people something. And if you don't have a well-defined outcome, like I think people struggle the most when they go in, they don't have an outline, right? So if you go in and you do pre-sales without at least a fairly detailed outline, you end up with this weird psychological game of I owe them more than I've actually promised them.
Mhm.
And it becomes very difficult to finish. I've actually walked into that trap, that massive, gnarly bear trap myself, and it sucks. So that is one of the biggest challenges with pre-sales, is not actually inviting people into the pre-edited content. It's more how that can mess with your head in terms of actually finishing the expectations. Yeah, that's really it.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's actually one other thing that I'll throw in, because you had mentioned about actually you had mentioned, Cattell, about like, are you writing about this before or speaking about it before? Like building a practice around blogging around a topic or a collection of problem space helps solve multiple problems. It can help you sort of test the waters and practice writing around the topic. It can also help you build the audience that you're wanting to launch the book to, which means you're not just putting a book out there and hoping that people will magically discover it. People who've discovered your writing, and the thought process, people discover your writing, it was useful to them and they want more, is a big part of the sort of marketing tool chain, and sort of kills 2 to 3 birds with one stone. It also fills in that feedback loop. Like if you're writing in a vacuum and you don't have things to interact with your audience, it can be very easy to find yourself losing confidence. And when you're still interacting with the audience while you're writing the book, it can help with okay, this is definitely something people want, or it can help guide your process as well.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. So many times I would say like maybe 50% of the time, if someone has a great idea, and even if they have a really strong outline and we just like, they haven't written anything before, we're like, go write a blog post, literally any blog, on your blog, on Medium, whatever. If you can get it published with someone, great, but I think that helps a lot.
That's really valuable. The process of writing is that whole the idea of like being intimidated by expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that would be really threatening. Kind of to that. I'm sorry. Was it Russ? Ross. I apologize. You were saying, you were thinking about this prospect of writing a book, and I was wondering maybe what things like appeal to you about that process, and maybe what things appeal, like maybe think, I don't know if I actually want to do this.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's something that I float back and forth on. So I mean, some of the things like pros. So let's talk about some of the pros. I'm evaluating building new businesses and consulting and contracting work. And at least in my industry, having published blog posts or having video tutorials or like sort of name recognition can be very, very valuable. So getting more content out there is incredibly valuable sort of long term, even if I don't necessarily make my money back on my time where I get below minimum wage for the thing that I'm creating now. The intent would be that it would pay off later. I think the things that it's a huge time commitment. It's definitely a huge time commitment. And it is also, at least for me, I'm too busy to actually do it. Like I have my video tutorial series was very, very successful in terms of bringing in new business, which means that I'm too busy now to actually find the time to do another thing, even though people have asked me, which is like, it's a great honor that like people, companies have asked me. But trying to carve out the time and identify the trade-offs of like, what's the lost opportunity costs? If I go do this book, I miss out on how, I can't do 10 or 20 hours of consulting a week. And what does that cost? And then will I make that up by raising my rates in a year from now? And what's that trade-off? So that's definitely something that I'm thinking about. I also had the video tutorial series that I did. I felt like I didn't get the support that I wanted out of the publisher that I was working with. They were very helpful at the beginning, like getting me to sign on the dotted line, which was not, and they were very supportive, like having, like I had an outline, we had a plan, we had a schedule, like it was very well organized. And once I was creating content every week, every 2 weeks, and other than, the first 3 videos where they said, say less, even though they're going to cut them out, they were like, just try to practice. It will make it easier for our editors. Yeah. Other than that, I didn't get any feedback from them on the content that I had created. And it, I'm not trying to ding them. These are things that I went through, which then means that in some ways I like getting feedback, whether it's positive or negative, and not getting any feedback. And in fact, it's been out there and I've been paid, like a lot of people have downloaded and viewed it. And I think I've had 2 people either review, or a lot of the source code is on GitHub and it's open source. And so I've had maybe 2 or 3 people interact with GitHub and a couple of reviews. But there's been, thousands of people have got this thing. And so it's like, wait, did what I create, people clearly were marketed into it, but maybe I underdelivered, or they didn't get the value, or it wasn't interactive. And maybe I didn't build it in such a way to be interactive. And maybe video tutorials are not an interactive medium. In my conversations with basically once we shipped, they were like, all right, here's your check, done. And a different department later on has now reached out and said, hey, we want to work with you. And it's like, I already work with you. Oh no, we didn't know that. Oh. Yeah. Oh. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking through. And it was rewarding. Like it's rewarding that, someone's like, do you know anything about CoreOS? And it's like, yeah, know a thing or 2 about it. And I don't need to say anything about it, but then usually later on they'll like Google and they're like, oh,
you're that guy.
You're that guy.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's me. And that's kind of cool and fun. And I really enjoyed the experience, but there was a lot of things that I didn't enjoy. And so I'm trying to find the balance. So those are some of the things I'm thinking through. And I think one of the biggest things that I felt that I didn't get out of my relationship with this particular instance was the like marketing and co-selling and co-branding of that publication. It was very much, here it is, it's on the internet. Like I sort of felt like the publisher was just like, all right, checkbox, we're done, we got that, we're good, and people are buying it. So like clearly they did their job, but I felt like I didn't. There are certain, especially, and I know like I have. And I know that there are other people that have done tutorials, like book signing things, in my course, and the publisher is there, and there's another author there that's got a book signing, and I'm like, oh, we released at the same time. Is my thing just as interesting? We're both speaking at the same conference on related topics.
So, hopefully, without speaking out of turn, and this is not true of all publishers, however. I know that there is the difference between you and that other person might be that that other person they know already draws an audience. A lot of the bigger publishers especially are lazy. And there's no other way to put it. Like they're going to put in the minimum amount of effort. They're going to capitalize on your brand.
they pitch it as though they're going to help your brand, but in reality, if they're banking on you doing something. Again, with a handful of rare exceptions, all of my friends who have published traditionally I have one friend in particular. He's actually a former student of mine who has published now twice. Once completely independently. I said 3 times. Once completely independently, once with a publisher, and then once with a publisher applying his independent, like self-publishing skills to the published book. Guess which one was the most successful? The one where he applied his independent publishing skills to the one with publisher. Basically, once they saw that he was a rocket ship taking off, then they threw some of their resources behind it. But essentially, if it's not performing on its own, they don't have the confidence to throw their dollars at it to earn those dollars back. He also got a smaller cut on that one, you know. Right. So like he probably netted a bit more on the one that he totally self-published, even though less copies were sold. However, it did beat out like a top product, like he's a product designer, and so it beat the top, the Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, which is like #1 product design always on Amazon. For about 3 weeks, he was beating out Don't Make Me Think, which is that's amazing in terms of your credentials to be able to say that. So that's a long way to say if you're working with a publisher, go in with low expectations and a plan that with them your plan will be better, but without them you still have a chance to succeed. I feel like that's the best way to succeed with. And I mean, honestly, that'll make the publisher really happy, and they will likely ask you back for a second book, and they'll put more resources into it. Again, I don't know how this translates to a book apart because you're a relatively small company, but I mean, O'Reilly being as big as they are, this is a repeat pattern with O'Reilly rocks basically all of the bigger technical publishers across the board. Yeah,
I've heard that as well. And I am the marketing department. So I mean, that is just to say that that's probably the end of the spectrum where we just hired our second employee this summer. So now that there's someone who's taking some of the, kind of just like management of the process over, I'm turning way more focus into marketing because that's been a huge issue. And not because we don't want to, but because of resources. So we will get to a launch and we're like, all right, awesome, it's out there. And then we're like, oh my God, shit, there's another book coming up. And we don't want to be in that mindset. We want to have a long-term kind of like relationship with the author, from working on the book together to we're actually putting together marketing plans that include sort of like a range of level of effort. So it's like, do you have a huge Twitter following? Here's some things you can do. Are you willing to do podcasts or, we do have one book that the author decided to do an audio book, and we essentially self-published it together, which was great. So I think, we're working on supporting that. But I think, and I don't know, are you trying to publish with someone, or are you thinking you're going to do self-publishing? Or
this is completely at just the very beginning stages where it's just an idea professionally that I feel like it would be very valuable to have something I can point at that says this is something Daniel wrote that is going to be that way in perpetuity. And so it's just it's definitely I don't know that you've even gotten to the point of I should send a proposal to a publisher or anything like that. It's
right.
I have a marketing related question. How you, the marketing department at a book apart, because you have a book launching next week.
Yes. What
does a book launch look like? How do you launch a book?
Yeah. So this is actually, it's a good question. It's good timing too, because this is sort of, believe it or not, this will be our 21st title, which is a lot.
That's cool.
And
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And it's the first book that we've done I've been working on the marketing and sort of the positioning and promotion for the last like 6 weeks, which is like usually where, you know, I should figure out someone will tweet about this. So it's great. Like we're already in a better position where we're, you know, sort of supporting it a lot more. So we've got, you know, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 podcast interviews lined up. We've got a few online magazines that are going to cover it. We also are doing a book, like a launch little, you know, party event. But the actual, you know, that actual day, essentially, we're sort of ramping up a few days before. We're, you know, we've been kind of talking about the book. And then that day, you know, we're really just like, it's available, you know, it's shipping. And then for that next, I would say like 2 to 4 weeks afterwards, it's sort of like where we're putting the most power behind really like blasting it out. And then again, like, because this is all part of an evolving marketing strategy, we're thinking about how do we do that, like for all of the books going forward. And clearly we have, you know, our catalog is almost 6 or 7 years old, which is amazing. So we have books in there that are, you know, we just did second editions of some things. And we also just launched a thing which seems very obvious. Like we have bundles of books now, which are like grouped thematically, which seems, like I said, it seems really obvious, but it's just, we've been thinking about ways to kind of like not resurface, but just like make sure people are seeing all of the different books we have. When I joined, we had 8 books, and it was really easy. We were like, look at our 8 books. So yeah, again, like I think it's tricky. The marketing thing is really, really tricky. And we do not want to be a publisher who is just being like, here you go.
Where literally do you market to? So I know you have a list apart as a web resource that, I mean, I've been reading that. I mean, not so much these days because I don't really do web development so much anymore,
right.
But I cut my teeth on a list apart.
For sure.
Like super important in my life.
Yeah.
I imagine this mailing list component to that as well.
Yep. Yeah.
But is that mailing list, other mailing lists, like when you are where are you launching to?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like right now, it's fairly small, and we've had the sort of the built-in kind of, you know, safety net of having a built-in audience.
Yeah.
So we've had a list apart and an event apart is like sort of this crossover audience that, you know, it's a lot of the same people reading the same stuff. So we of course market to them.
Yep.
But this is the thing. Like just in the last, I'd say, you know, year or so, we've started to reach out to literally like everyone from Wired to Forbes to, you know, Brain Pickings to the Next Web, just to see, like, are people interested? Funny enough, I just had a conversation with someone, their social team at Madewell, which is a clothing company, because they are doing more lifestyle content, which a lot of brands are doing. And I was thinking, wow, this is actually an avenue I hadn't thought about, but they're creating these blog posts and stuff, and they're doing something on like what, you know, strong business women or whatever are reading, and they want to feature one of our books. And I was like, of course that came to me, but I hadn't even thought about
you could proactively look for stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think like right now, to your question, I'm trying to figure out like what the strategy is to actually get into audiences that don't know who we are, and may have heard of us or just don't know that our books could be helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, figuring that out.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's way cool.
Rewinding a little bit, I love your book. Like I was looking at your website and I was like, ooh, I wish I did more front end design, because then I could be like, you know, all right, yeah, that book bundle looks great.
Yes.
I really like that idea.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I think, you know, again, just I think I would say, and you know, just as like advice unsolicited, the biggest things that I've seen authors find valuable is And whether you're working with a publisher or not, even if you just have a friend who is a good enough editor, just work with someone who is willing to give you feedback and be open to it. I think that's a big part of it. And also, yeah, you know, if like, even if, again, if you're not working with someone who's got infrastructure, if you know people who are willing to share the fact that you're writing something and kind of help you with that marketing. I don't know, I'm just a big fan of asking for help and support.
Yeah.
Writing is lonely and
in the context here, I mean, I haven't seen it specifically in action. Actually, that's not true. We do it every day. I was gonna say, like, here at Indie Hall, like just being able to reach out to this crew.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing where the person editing doesn't necessarily need to be an expert in the topic, and actually maybe
Totally.
there's a strength of them not being an expert in the topic,
You never am.
being able to, you know, look at it critically and say, you know, is this as clear as it could be? If the answer might be yes, then they're just, you know, it's just, there's a basic knowledge gap. That's one thing, but that could be super helpful.
Yeah.
And it also depends on who your audience is too. So if it's something that's going to be a little bit more at the beginner level, you really don't want somebody who knows anything. If it's going to be like more technical writing, then you might want someone who's like not me.
Yeah.
Who can be like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this was clear and I understood how to do it, versus I have no idea what any of this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, in some of my work, there's this like distinction between having an editor for the words and an editor for sort of the technology or what have you, so that you know, you have somebody to pick it apart and say, oh no, this is this is like the finer point that you're missing or whatever, and then somebody else to say, what did you mean by this sentence?
Right.
And it's not often that you get one person that does both.
Right.
It's true.
That's very true. Yeah.
So on sort of this marketing angle, is there something that makes a book more marketable than others?
I mean, from our perspective, like, I think you touched on this earlier, and sort of, I think, well, we would look at it slightly differently than an O'Reilly, but I think there is something to that, right? Like, if someone, you know, one of our books is written by a guy named Mike Montero, and if you know him, you know all about him.
Yeah.
He's like very loud and
Internet famous under a persona.
yeah, exactly. And so while, you know, we may not agree with everything he does, he has a huge audience that he has organically built over, you know, a very long period of time. And he is willing to, like, he made a video about why you should buy his last book and how to share it with people. Like, not everyone's going to do that. And for us, we're like, great. Like, how can we help support that? That's awesome. We certainly don't, it's not a requirement. But I think, yeah, and this is something that we're, you know, sort of starting to build out a little bit, is like, how can we help people who are already doing that? And then people who aren't sure where to start, like, how can we give them some tools to do that? I think, you know, it's so many things. It's like title, positioning. We have a book on research that does gangbusters all the time. It's called Just Enough Research, and I feel like half of it is the title is like, I know what that book is going to be about.
Well, I think that's it.
So
that I mean, I think books about something, I don't think perform nearly as well as books that address a very specific problem. And like a recurring issue with the students that we teach who ship technical books is every time they come to us with their specific thing, we tell them, get smaller, get more specific. The fact that your books are like constrained by size, I think helps tremendously with that.
Sure.
Like, you kind of have to be really specific.
Yeah.
Like, a book about a thing is tough to sell. A book that addresses a problem set, makes it really easy to communicate what they're going to get for reading it.
Definitely.
Makes it very easy for you to avoid overstuffing it with things that don't need to be there. Because back when you're in that outlining process, you can say, oh, here's a bunch of things that I clearly want to put in the book, but if I ask myself honestly, does that help the person get where they need to go? And the answer is no, cut it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of folks, like, people don't pay by the page.
Right.
Some people like will definitely scoff and be like, why am I paying so much for a a 40-page book, and I'm like, well, if it's the right 40 pages and it's going to save you X number, X amount of time, or treat it like a shortcut, right? So I think books that act as shortcuts are some of the most marketable, business/technical books.
Yeah.
As a reader, I think ebooks have made it a lot more a lot easier, at least, to kind of buy a very short book and feel like you're getting your money's worth. Where if you were to walk into a bookstore and you see a hardcover of poetry that's this thin, you kind of feel like, what am I getting here exactly? And where with an ebook, it's just like the dimension of the book itself is immaterial, and it's just is this good?
Yeah. You also get to play with digital stuff. You get to play with formats and mediums that written books don't necessarily give you. So that means you can A, play to your strengths, and B, play to the types of formats that your audience prefers. So like a screencast series, if you're going for an audience on a topic that is going to be very hard to write about but very easy to screencast about, why the hell would you write a book? It's writing a book for the sake of writing a book. Format is almost the last decision once you figure out who you're writing for, what you're going to help them accomplish, and then what your strengths are. Like the Venn diagram of that should dictate what the end product is, if that makes sense. I mentioned before, did a reverse audiobook because every attempt for me to write a book, and I've written this many books worth of words on my own site, but to sit down and write something end to end was a challenge. I decided to play to the strengths of, I knew that a lot of people that were starting or wanting to start co-working spaces, so I could talk just about the starting process. Everything we did up until we opened the door to ensure that when we opened the door was successful. I already had a fast-growing audience of podcast listeners who I had heard. I've been writing for a decade, but in the 12 months that I've been podcasting, I heard from 10 times more people that they learned and listened to something from the podcast. Even if it was less people, I heard from more of them, which was interesting. And then I realized it's going to be really easy for me to sit down on the microphone with a co-host, effectively, in this case it was Adam, and come up with a audio recording format. And then I sent all the audio off to be transcribed. So my working in public, the beta was essentially like an 11-chapter podcast to a degree, and then I sent it off to be transcribed, and now I'm working on editing the transcriptions down to something that is more concise, easier to read, and things like that. So this was me finally following my own advice of using that Venn diagram overlap. And I got an email this morning from a guy who's like, I just finished a road trip. Your book blew my mind. This is exactly what I needed right now. So, Sam, I think we've got a tour perhaps.
Yep.
Cruising in.
So.
I was going to say, I think we're kind of approaching our time limit here.
Yeah, I was catching that as well. No, any sort of closing thoughts from anybody?
I am on Slack all the time, and if you have any questions, I will, like I said, I'll share all the stuff that that we use that might be helpful, and please hit me up.
Cool, thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for sharing your experiences and everything. It's been really enlightening, and I definitely feel like I have a better idea of kind of what this process looks like, particularly at the beginning of how to get started and that kind of stuff. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll count myself as a resource as well. I know you and I were direct messaging a bit. I've got some more stuff I can point you to, and I'll share in our wrap up as well.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks for organizing this.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.